Hello there and welcome to Art and Self. I am Cindy Ingram, your host and the founder of Art Class Curator, the Curated Connections Library, and the Art Connection Circle. In this podcast, we experience the range and depth of what it means to be human, seen through our connections and conversations about intriguing works of art. These art conversations are here to show you that art is here for you as a catalyst, a challenger, a coach, and a comfort. If you love listening to these insightful conversations and you want to be a part of them, I would love to welcome you into the Art Connection Circle. You can get more information at artandself.com/circle, or just click the link in the show notes. Hello, and today we have an amazing interview. I have been doing these Art Connection conversations since, I think, November or December, when I restarted with this format of the podcast. And, I've had a lot of favorites, a lot of conversations that have left just feeling really excited or energized or moved or whatever it is. And this is one of those episodes. I had such a delightful experience talking with artist Geoffa Fells. And there were times in this episode where I just closed my eyes and listened to her talk about music too, in relationship to art. And it was like purely magical for me almost. So I really hope that you experience that too with this conversation. I just absolutely had the best time talking to her. So I hope you do too. Before we get started, I want to remind you that the Art Connection Circle is coming very soon. We have enrollment open for 2 sessions this summer. One of them starts on June 15th and the other one starts on July 13th. And it's a really special, powerful program where you get to talk about art in a beautiful community who also love to have these deep conversations too, and also spend a lot of time learning about yourself and doing that through talking about art. It's a super special experience, and I hope you can join me. The link to join is artandself.com/circle, and look forward to seeing you in there. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Art and Self podcast. I am here with artist Geoffa Fells, and I'm so excited to have you with me today. Welcome.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
So before we get started, can you tell our listeners a little bit about you?
A little bit about me. Yes, I am a composer and visual artist and trumpet player. And I'm very playful. I'm currently writing a piece around an illuminated ball pool with the balls. Basically, like, what can the ball pool balls be? Like, imagining them in different ways. So the ball pool balls can be an audience, and they can be instruments. They can also be a game. They can be paintbrushes. They can be a tapestry to project on. So it's like, what can these things be in metaphorical ways? And I guess, like, I'm very interested in like neurodivergence and different ways of thinking and making art in multi-sensory ways that are more inclusive for lots and lots of people. So something like a ball pool ball is really inclusive.
Yeah. So in US, I think we call it ball pit, but you're talking about those little, like the big, like pits of where all the little plastic balls are.
Yeah.
Okay. Just making sure we were talking the same language.
Hundreds and hundreds, many plastic balls.
I love it. Oh, it's so funny because I was in San Antonio this past weekend for a conference and I didn't get to go to it, but there was an art exhibit that had a ball pit with a bunch of like glow in the dark balls, and they were all like black light on them, and they were all like lit up. The pictures were so cool, but I didn't manage to make it there. So when you say you're working with you're creating a piece on that, are you writing like a piece of music, or are you making a visual art piece, or is it like a mix of both? Or
well, I've been working with the ball pool balls for quite some time. Devised a performance with my neurodiverse ensemble Nth Tangent, and that was wonderful. They went everywhere, the balls. And then at the moment, like, I'm currently writing a piece because I'm composer in residence with Matrix in Belgium, and I'm writing this piece where it's about the emotions. So the balls are kind of representing what is unseen, and all of these emotions just shifting and changing like weather patterns. And so there's different rhythms that coincide with different emotional weather states. And yeah, and that like basically affects how many balls are dropped into this river that's going to be circling the stage. And so every time, like more of a rainy rhythm comes up, more of a rainy weather forecast rhythm comes up, the piece will shift and change with that weather forecast, and more balls will be dropped into the river. And then the weather forecast is going to be played by a clarinetist who basically puts on the scores. The scores are worn, so when the weather changes, they're like, oof, I need a jumper on now. So he puts a jumper on, and then the score is printed on backwards, and he reads it via a mirror. That's the idea around the piece right now. And then the scarf and the hat and all of these different items of clothing have the different weather forecasts like connected to emotions that are all read via a mirror.
Oh, that is so fascinating. Is this going to be online anywhere, like a video of it that we'll be able to watch? Or is it mostly like you have to experience it in person?
I don't know, but I can find out. It's going to be, I think it's for the Transit Festival in Belgium, in Leuven, in October time. So I've got a while to finish writing it.
Okay. So note to self, try to get to Belgium in October. Yes, I need to see this. That sounds amazing. So you work with a group of musicians and artists together to create these experiences. Can you tell me more about that group and how that came to be?
Well, I guess when you're neurodivergent, or when you have a slightly different functioning brain, you experience a lot of othering. Sometimes that's quite subtle, like comments like, oh, that's a bit creative for me, Geoffa. And I'm like, well, you appreciate this, so can you see me in a broader way? And that othering and the barriers do take a toll. So I decided to bring more neurodivergent artists and musicians into my life. And the main way that I've done that is I set up an ensemble called Nth Tangent, which is for all neurodiverse musicians. So yeah, but I really enjoy working with people with like quite profound disability as well. So yeah, anyone with a different brain, and survivors of trauma as well, their brains function in a different way as well. So yeah, I enjoy working with them too.
Excellent. And I know some of y'all's work is on your website, so I'll make sure I link to that in the show notes. We can explore that. And so I know that one of the disorders that you particularly have is dissociative identity disorder. Can you tell me more about that and our listeners what that is?
So yeah, I have DID. It used to be known as multiple personality disorder, but that name is not fully representative. So, but I do live with multiplicity. I am multiple. I have at least 9 alters, and we experience sort of switching between those different alters. Sometimes when we switch, we can have complete amnesia for a period of time. So that can, for some people, that can be hours. Others, it can be days, weeks, sometimes even months. That can be missing time if one alter is fronting and there is amnesia between you and that particular alter. In my system, we refer to the group of alters as a system. And in my system, I've got quite a few littles who actually are very helpful for art making because they are so creative and have a really low threshold for wonder, particularly Smudge. They are like a playful 4-year-old, loves things like marble runs and going walking and like just, yeah. So yeah, Smudge is fun. Yeah.
I love that how each part of you gets to have a role in creating your artwork. That's delightful, because a lot of adults, I think, lose that sense of creativity and play and fun and experimentation somewhere along the way. Like that was that quote by Picasso that everyone's an artist. They just need to remember.
Yeah.
Or every child is an artist or something like that. I don't remember the exact quote, but there's a quote in there. So how does that look when you're making art? Like what might that look like if your alters are playing a part in your, am I saying it right? Your alters, that's what you said, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
I just want to
Most
make sure I say the
people,
right thing.
yeah, there's various lingo. Some people call them like others or alters, or parts is sometimes used. Yeah, they all make quite different things. I'm what you would call the host. I'm the main identity, I guess, the one that sort of most feels like me. So when I switch back to me, it's coming home. Like, you know where your slippers are, you make a cup of tea, I'm home. Then Sophie is quite shy, but contemplative and quite a deep thinker and questioner. But she does very sort of subtle things, like she tends to work with things like sellotape, like transferring micro textures onto another texture, or doing like layers of writing and things. And then Ruby is very energetic, loud teenager, lots of color, quite confident, very funny, interjects me a lot. Then there's Masha, who's like 21. I suppose she likes control, so actually she's often not very happy with what she makes. But I do try and include everything from everyone in some way. So some of my pieces will suddenly, like, there'll be a massive shift from, a full-on atonal modern music sound, which is more of my vibe, to something like soul or jazz, which is Ruby's thing, and it will just suddenly change because I've switched. Or like I'll find a score that one of the others has written and I'd have no memory of writing it, but I'm like, this is good stuff, I need to try and include this in my work. But it does take a lot of like managing, and it's like looking after a family. You have to listen to them, otherwise it can be quite painful. And sometimes some of the art will be quite dark and quite like Edward's stuff is, quite full of pain and ripping and tearing and cutting, reassembling and cutting again, that kind of thing. So it's not, I don't want to make it out like DID is fun and fantastic, because it is quite tricky to manage sometimes. But yeah, it does yield interesting results when I do a good job of including all of them.
Yeah. Well, I think that's beautiful to think about, is that you are acknowledging and respecting all of the different parts of you. And I can imagine the whole system would be pretty traumatic if the host you is constantly trying to silence the rest of them instead of like allowing them to be seen and heard. And
it doesn't work for very long. You can't get away with it for very long. You can try and reason with them and say, look, like, just give me 10 minutes, okay? Just give me 10 minutes, and then you can do your flashback thing and be unwell. Like, just give me a minute, okay?
Yeah.
But you can't do that forever. You do have to give them what they need. And sometimes that is, when it's a little, sometimes that is playing with a marble run. And, like my friends, I have had friends sort of take me by the hand when I've switched to a little and take me home. So, it is what it is. But yeah, they do come up.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I can imagine too. I think it's kind of an important lesson for any person, whether they have, DID or anything, is that, those parts of you, like the parts that are sad or angry, like the more you stuff those down, like the bigger it gets and it kind of festers. I know that happens for me. So I love that. It's a welcome place for them, and their feelings. So we're going to look at a work of art today, and we had a pre-meeting to kind of talk about what could happen, and if you do switch, and what kind of art to avoid, and what kind of art, and that sort of thing. But for the listeners who haven't had that conversation, is there anything that you would want to tell them to be aware of for this conversation about your DID?
I guess, like, even if I don't full on switch, the others are there and they're listening all the time. And sometimes I get like a clear feeling where I'm like, oh, I think Edward is responding in this way. And sometimes there can be like shifts in my viewpoint on something depending on who's around and who thinks what. And sometimes their responses can be quite conflicting and, really conflict with each other on, what they think about something. So yeah, I will, if I feel what's going on, I will share.
Okay.
Different
And then you
points
said
of view.
sometimes, though, you don't really, you might not be fully aware that it's happening. So,
Yeah,
we'll just, So we'll just sort of go with it. Oh, yes. Yeah. The one was like, even if we've already talked about something, it might come up again because you might not remember, like it had already been talked about or whatever. So,
yeah.
Awesome. Okay. Well, you also had said that sometimes answering questions can take a long time to answer and that sometimes decisions can take a while. So instead of the typical 4 artworks that I usually offer the guests, I have picked 2 for you to choose from. So at least we can give you a little bit of choice, and then I'll show them to you, and then you can kind of feel into whichever one feels like the juiciest one for you to talk or want to talk about. And then
Juiciest. Juicy is a good word.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see. Your first choice is Dance of the Nine Opals by Ithel Colquhoun. And I guarantee I'm saying that name wrong, but it's from 1942. And then the other option here is Rite of Spring, 1971 by Eileen Agar.
Oh, ooh, good choices.
Oh, thank you.
See, this is tricky because my littles are really vibing with number 2, but I prefer the first one.
Yeah, that got the most sort of gut reaction from you there. So
yeah,
really I thought the littles might like all the rainbow vibes and flowers of the second one.
Yeah, they do.
Awesome. Okay, so we're going to go with this. I'm trying to get the title off so we don't focus too much on that. There we go. All right, I will make this bigger. So we're going with Dance of the Nine Opals by Ithel Colquhoun. Again, don't know how to say the name. I should learn. All right, so what drew you to it? What made you kind of have that reaction?
I think, firstly, the sort of like sense of multiplicity in the image straight away. Like, I just really vibed with that and the placement of each of them in these sort of like bodies.
Yeah.
And the interconnectedness between them, but also how each feels like an emotion. Yeah, it feels very emotional, and I really enjoy painting emotions. So
Excellent.
those are the main reasons.
Great. So we will include this image on our show notes as always. But if someone is driving and they can't quite look at it yet, I'd like to do a description of it for them. So can you describe what you see, and then I'll fill in any details that I notice as well?
Okay, so there's a vibrant sort of energetic central column with this sort of light energy pulsing through into these pale flower like stamen petal like sort of flowing out at the top.
Yeah.
Then this is surrounded by like a webbed network of body like figure like paintings, bubbly, emotional, marbly kind of vibes. Then in the background there is a pinkish greyish mountain scene coming more red and orange to the foreground, and a darker sky with a little tinge of cloud in behind that, and then kind of what looks like a green version of the London Underground tube map symbol.
Oh, yeah. It does look like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, this one is super hard to describe. They all are. Every time I'm like, we kind of described it, but you have to see it to believe it. Yeah, I think there's these red lines that connect all of those sort of figures that you talked about. Or actually, there's red, yellow, orange, blue, a lot of different lines. They connect to each other in various ways, and then they also connect up to that like energy, glowing flower situation that Geoffa mentioned. They connect to each other and to that. They do look like a system.
Yeah, they
altogether.
do. Yeah.
Okay. So definitely go check out the show notes at artandself.com if you want to look at the image. And so what's calling you to talk about first? What feels like the first thing to mention and discuss?
I just kind of noticed that there's this like very subtle glow between those two stones at the very back, because I was kind of looking at it thinking like, oh, where's this power coming from? Because this is like power like pulsing through this thing, like,
Yeah.
and it's very sculptural, and I feel like I can feel it. I feel like I can, like, those strings connecting each of those bodies. I feel like I can dong 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 dong
Oh,
dong 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 dong, and now like I'm seeing like a bow come out, and like a cello bow, and like they're bowing the and then just thinking about how, because it was called a dance, and like thinking about how, they're hearing all of this happening, and it's making them reverberate, and they
mm.
can feel that through their chest, through their body, which is then changing the colors and marbling colors on their bodies. Yeah.
Oh, I love it. Oh, and I'm so glad we had that talk at the beginning about your ball music composition thing, about the emotions and all the different things, because now I can see how that's like being represented in this painting. And I didn't even know about the ball pit thing before this conversation. So, oh, I love it. And then how each of the, like, if all of those figures are sort of experiencing different emotions and sort of emitting different emotions, like that's going to change the sound of whatever,
Yeah.
of the tightness of the string or whatever it is
Yeah,
that
yeah,
makes the
yeah.
music change.
Like
Adding,
this push and pull relationship between them, I guess. And the fact that they all are where they are because of each other. They're holding each other in
mm,
this like suspended rhythm. Yeah.
oh yeah, yeah, that kind of makes me think too. Is like if part of me thinks they're floating in air, but part of me thinks they're standing on. I can't really. Every time I think I have an answer, my mind changes.
Maybe that depends how you feel, because if you feel grounded, you're going to see them standing. But if you feel like, oh, elated, no, then they can fly. They can float.
Ah, yeah. I think that's perfect because I am like midway between those two things. Today has been a really weird day. And I'm like a little bit anxious, but also like kind of grounded in my like, and so maybe that's why I keep getting myself all thrown off. Oh, I love this. Now I can just hear this painting.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, that's so cool. Yeah, and so you mentioned too these stones in the back that so like this green line goes from the front right and it goes through the center of the system, and it has the light kind of flower petal thing, kind of stem coming up, but then it keeps going back, and then there's two stones. It's almost like a road that's going to those places because it's the mountains break to allow
Yeah.
that. And
Yeah.
what are you making of that?
Well, I suppose there's in the system there's quite a lot of whiteness, like the brightness. And in the
Mm,
background there isn't so much apart from between those two stones. It feels like the original sound, the seed of sound emanated from there originally. And maybe the system was formed from that path, following that green line.
yeah. Yeah, because yeah, if you there's like the sky is kind of dark and it's kind of moody, but in that one spot too, the sky is bright and like
Yeah,
white right there.
yeah. And
Like if you were to go past, you would see something really exciting if you
yeah,
kept going there.
and it's the only bit of the background that sort of shares the palette of the white and the yellow
Mm,
with the rest of this sort of system sculpture. And yeah, like the background just feels like another world. There is
mhm.
a sort of sense of doom, of like unknown, of like inquisitiveness and wonder. Like I wonder what is there, but at the same time, there's like that nervousness to look over the edge and see, I guess.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Because it does like the sky with like the kind of bright red of the ground, and then the mountain color. Like none of it is very like realistically. It almost feels like it's on Mars. It's definitely some other planet, some other beings.
Yeah, it's almost like it calls to question, or it's calling me to question like, how do I feel on this planet and how would I feel on that planet? Because I feel like it would be quite different. Like right now, I can really feel my chair underneath me because obviously we're on Earth and Earth has this much gravity.
Yeah.
But I feel like the gravity there is lesser. Things are composed of different things. It's a different temperature. It feels like an alien world. And I guess in seeing it as an alien world, I'm imagining how my body would feel different.
Yeah. It's also making me think, now that you've said that, is that what if these figure color blobs are like what we would be energetically without our bodies? If the essence of us were to be like taken out and put on this planet, and like we would all be like, we wouldn't all just be these sort of standard human meat people. Like we would be these like blobs of energy, and everybody is a little bit different, and everybody is, I don't know. It's just like maybe
Like
like go ahead.
a possible projection of evolution
Ooh.
were it to happen on this planet. We wouldn't need a full face and eyes anymore. Maybe we could be more fluid,
Oh,
communicating through actual connection and like almost like a emotional lava sort of displayed on our skin like an octopus.
yeah. Just like an energetic like meeting of energies. It makes me think, I read this book a few years ago, and I'm not going to remember the title, but I'll try to put it in the show notes if I remember. But it's about I almost had the title, it like popped in and then it left. But it was about she was a neurosurgeon, but then she had a stroke. And so she experienced stroke of insight. Is that the name? I don't know. That's going to bother me that I don't know the name of the book. But so she had a stroke. And so, but it was on the side of her brain that controlled language. And so she wasn't able to understand words. She couldn't speak words, like that wasn't connecting. But she said what she could understand was people's feelings and their energy. If a doctor was coming in and that doctor was projecting really positive energy and really loving and helpful, like she could really feel that, and she felt really comfortable with some people. And then some people was really agitated because it's like her right side got more heightened. I think it was the right side of her brain that does the emotional stuff, and the left was the language. And it was a really fascinating book that she said it was almost like a spiritual experience, because it was like transcending the part of ourselves that is usually secondary. The language and the logic part is the part that usually shows up, but that part was not there. So she only had the emotions to communicate with. So anyway, that made me think of that.
That's really interesting, and that's really fascinating, actually, because with one of my switches, Sophie, well, there's a couple of them that do this. It's a really difficult experience to describe, but when I switched to them, suddenly non-verbal communication and expression just means absolutely nothing, like nothing at all. Like my friend can be stood there and suddenly I can't tell whether they're sad, happy. Well, Sophie can't tell whether they're sad, happy, angry, annoyed, in pain, annoyed at me. And it's such a like weird, but and also very distressing experience, because those like feelings of warmth or feelings of joy or feelings of, oh, okay, that you get when you're reading someone's non-verbal communication that just seems so natural and so normal, when those aren't there, it just throws everything. So how fascinating.
Yeah. And, it makes me think too, I know you mentioned neurodiversity a lot at the beginning, and my husband and I have a daughter and a husband that are both autistic. And but I'm like super intuitive about people. On the like emotion, I can read people's emotions really well. I can pick up on all of that. And my whole marriage, I could never do that with him. I don't know. I had no clue what he's thinking or feeling at any time ever. And I was like, how can I do this with everyone else in my life, but I can't do it with him? We didn't know he was autistic and now I know. I'm like, oh, it's because his brain is operating completely differently than mine. So I'm like expecting him to be So it's really fascinating. Like everybody's brain too is wired differently to pick up on those things differentently.
Yeah, I think I have a lot of autism in my family, and I just think, oh, maybe all of that just landed in these two alters. Because when I was assessed for ADHD, they did say, oh, is it across all your alters or just some of them? So I think it is a thing that neurodivergence and sometimes certain conditions are not shared across all of them. Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that blew my mind open a little bit. Now I'm just like processing how that is.
There's one person with DID who does an interview on YouTube, and she has some of her alters have celiac disease and others don't.
Oh, what?
Because there are neurons throughout your body. So yeah, body and mind is not as distinct and separated as we think.
Yeah, it's not as like concrete, and your biology is not like black and white, like you don't either have something or you don't. Oh. Sorry. I'm just like, wow. Okay, I'm gonna go find that person. What's that person's name?
Oh, I can't remember.
Okay, I'm gonna Google it and I will find it.
But I know that she has members in her system that are like magical creatures, and so I was like, oh, you are cool. I wish I had a unicorn in my system.
Yeah, that is so fascinating. That is so fascinating. Okay. Anyway, okay, back to the art. Is there like I really my mind is just like now so curious. Okay. What else in the art is calling you to talk about?
I guess as well, this sense of movement with the colors in each of the bodies. I guess I feel like they're at a point in their mixing. So the colors are not fully mixed together yet, but they could be. And it's like if you have lots of colors of Play-Doh and you're always tempted to like put lots of the colors together, but eventually you end up with that same muddy brown that you just wish you hadn't got there. I kind of feel like all of them are in this process of on the way to that sort of muddy brown, and they know they're going to end up there, but at the moment they're just at that beautiful, perfect place between sort of rainbow vibrancy of the colors and distinction of the colors, but that little bit of muddying between each one. And I'm just sort of imagining this spoon sort of coming in and stirring each of those colors, and that journey from distinct to mixed.
Yeah. And I'm finding too, as I look at, if I just really focus on one of them, they're not moving, but I feel like they are. I feel like I'm seeing that swirl. I feel like I could see maybe the red. I could even see like the red of this one in the front middle, like get bigger and smaller, and like all of those morphing together. I mean, it's like the more I stare at them, the more I see the movement and energy, which then makes me think about the artist and the movement and her energy as she created those. Like, was she feeling certain? Like, what was she doing? Was she like feeling a certain emotion and kind of letting it flow through to her? Like, it feels very intuitive on her part too.
Yeah, and why connect the ones that she has connected with certain colors? Like, who is reaching out to who in this system?
Yeah.
And who... Because the green... There's only one green or two or three green connections that I can see, but then there's loads and loads sort of pouring out from that red.
Yeah, you know what I didn't notice until you just said this just now, that the colors on the forms, that the color of the line matches with wherever it meets up. I did not even notice that before. I thought it was kind of more random.
Yeah. No, it's a really sort of feels like a really emotion-driven reaching out between them. Part of their self is reaching out to the others.
And I wonder, too, if maybe each color was to represent an emotion. Like, I wonder if, like, the red and the orange and the yellow are, like, stronger emotions or more, like, energetically vibrant emotions, the ones that like come or more aggressively. Because I feel like red and orange and yellow, there's a lot of them. And those colors, are in color theory, they come out. I keep like throwing my hands in front of my face as if you all can see me. But I'm like, to me, the colors are just like being thrown out at us. But it's like, are those emotions more or stronger, or I don't know.
That's also a different way of blending color as well, because we've got more of a weave vibe going on with the layering, them reaching out. So we've got this sort of mixing and marbling, and then we've got the more distinct background colors, but then this layering over the top, when you sort of let your focus go, those vibrant reds and yellows, they sort of meld together in a different way. I just think that's really beautiful. Yeah, and if they were to keep weaving and weaving, what if you stepped back from that piece of fabric? What color would they end up with if they kept going?
That's fascinating. Would it be the muddy brown of the Play-Doh?
I think it is, yeah. Yeah, I think it is the muddy brown. Okay, I've gained a little bit more respect for muddy brown.
Yeah. Yeah, because it incorporates everything.
Yes, it does. Yeah, but you can always take a step in and look and see the colours again. It's woven.
And all people are some version of brown, like a tan brown to a dark, like everybody is some version of brown, but inside of us is all the colors. That's so cheesy that I just said that out loud. I'm like, it's so cheesy, but it's true. We are colors. Oh. And that's more movement so you saw like the movement and the musicality of it, which music is movement. It's the movement of sound through time or whatever, the definition I've heard said before. So we're seeing that movement. We're seeing the movement of all those color swirls within each little blob, and then the movement of all of those connections kind of coming out, and then like the movement of how they're connecting now and what they will, if they were to continue sending out their connections, like what it will be.
Also the movement of the groundedness versus lifted of the whole sculpture. And I sort of question, where if she was to paint another, if she kept painting, or if this was, in her imagination, where might this land next? It does feel like it could sort of leave this place and continue, and the dance could continue somewhere else. And would it spin as it lifted off? Would the petals and things close before lifting off?
Ooh. Yeah, I definitely get like a spinning vibe from it too. Like, those amusement park rides that have the swings that spin and you sit in the swing.
Yes,
I keep thinking of that that these are like swinging from that top part, but then they're all connected. So it's like that's a movement outwards.
Yeah.
But then we've got this like
it expands,
bottom part,
doesn't it? Yeah.
And so they all could kind of come back in and maybe integrate too at the bottom once they stop spinning.
Yeah, and that feeling like when you lean back and you look up at the clouds and your whole body is just moving through space and you forget that you're connected to anything. But then you also are connected because you're experiencing so much on a sensory level. Yeah. And I'm just imagining now, like, if the clouds weren't the blue and white that I had last time, but they were this sky, this sort of dark blue grey with those sort of highlights of red. Just sort of riding those highlights of red. Yeah.
Wow. So the listeners didn't get to see, but you just did such a lovely thing. Like your eyes were closed and like you were like fully in imagining it. And then your hands were sort of swaying with it. And I was like, I could tell, like I could see that you're a musician. Just like as like I could see you were like if you would have just kept going, like you would have like written a song, or something. I love that. Like you're really putting yourself into the artwork, which is beautiful.
Yeah, I enjoy imagining a lot, just having something, a prompt, and then letting myself drift off and just letting myself experience it in the way they want to experience it. Yeah, and I was also just thinking just then about how, I don't know, how my sound, their sound, these bird sounds, how they could fill this landscape. Like, it's a big landscape, and yet they fill it. They really do fill it on the page. And I'm imagining that sound, especially like from the petals at the top. I'm also sort of hearing pipes and flutes, and maybe like full on organ, just filling this landscape with sounds. And then I'm floating along this red on this ride, and I'm hearing like French horn notes, and they're bouncing off the landscape at the back. And it's like there are these caverns where the notes are so, like, they resonate for such a long time. It's like they're held in space, held by the landscape. Like, the landscape is almost like replying back to everything that's happening with this sculpture. So it's kind of like it's connected, but it's not connected. But it's connected through sound, even though it's not physically connected.
Yeah. Oh, I could listen to that. You talk about that forever. I'm like, oh, I'm seeing this. I mean, I could see it and hear it at the same time. I love that. How amazing. I think I've put this artwork in front of it's been a choice for a few people so far. No one has chosen it yet. And I'm so glad it was you that chose it and not anybody else, because the musicality of it, I'm not sure anybody else would have seen the depth of that quite so beautifully.
Now I'm seeing the very light lines coming from the bottom. I don't know why I'm seeing them as like the tips of pages. So, like, I just feel like I could peel that page and open the book, and the pages of the book would be bright white with...
So like the ones that come to the bottom?
Yeah, I'm just seeing them like page corners. I could just pull the pages open on each of those. Yeah.
Oh, and then if you did that, what happened to the rest of it? Would it just kind of cease to exist, or would it just turn into...
It'd be a memory.
Yeah.
As you sort of read the next chapter, becomes memory.
Oh, I love it. Okay. Like, I feel like that was such a poetic thing. That might be a really good place to end as our hour is kind of coming up. But is there anything left in the painting that you feel you've been kind of curious about that we haven't talked about, or anything that you feel is left unsaid?
I feel good. I feel a sense of wholeness because we've journeyed somewhere with it. And I did switch a couple of times. So I also feel that sense of like more than me, like more than me has experienced and communicated today.
Yeah, you all got to experience this work of art together.
Yeah.
Thank you. Oh, it was really such a delight. I got chills a few times. It's such a delight to talk to you about this painting today. And can you tell people where they can find you online to see your work and see what you're up to?
Yeah, I've got a website, geoffafells.com. I do my best at updating it. Yeah. And there's stuff. Yeah, that's got most things on it, I think. Yeah, okay. I think so, yeah.
Awesome. We will link to that in the show notes so everyone can experience more of your work. And again, we'll put the artwork, Dance of the Nine Opals by Ethel Kulhan, up on the show notes as well. And thank you so very much for joining me today. This was truly a delight.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It's been really nice to chat to you today.
Thank you so much for listening to Art and Self. And if you loved what you heard and you want to be a part of these exciting conversations about art, I would love to invite you to join the Art Connection Circle. In the Art Connection Circle, we get together in an intimate small group and have deep conversations about works of art centered around our own self-development, our own personal experience, and what we bring to the conversation, just like we do in these art conversations on the podcast. You can find more information out about this program at artandself.com/circle, or you can click the link in the show notes. You can also find links to the artworks that we discussed over on the show notes, and then you can also find me on Instagram and on Facebook. Just search for Cindy Ingram Art and Self. Thank you so much for listening. Have a wonderful week, and I will see you next time.